So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our annual alumni conference. I am thrilled to see all of you here in person. We love having you back on our beautiful campus. And I don't know if you noticed, but we even have the blue and gold flowers in the front of Haas. That's a new addition. It's such a great honor to serve as your dean. I'm feeling so empowered by all the work that we are accomplishing together. We could not do any of it without your partnership and your support. Now, before I share how Haas is leading the way in reimagining business, let me start by thanking all of you for some pretty amazing examples of how you are pillars of support to us and to each other. We have volunteer leaders here today, and when I mention either your affinity group or the city that you're representing or the region you're representing, can you just stand up so everyone can know that you're here and they can reach out to you if they need to? So we have volunteer leaders here today representing regional chapters from New York. Anyone from New York? Seattle. Anyone from Seattle? Hong Kong. Hong Kong. Who's here from Hong Kong? Stand up. Woo! And the Bay Area. Regional chapters from the Bay Area. Stand up, all of you. As well as affinity groups like Brea. Who's here from Brea? Anyone? Okay. That's our real estate group. Thank you for standing up. Our sustainability affinity group, which is new. Anyone here from that? Woo! Our Berkeley Angel Network. Who's here from that? We all want to know. And the Women in Leadership I'm not group. Stand up! Come on, stand up! Okay, they are all eager to connect with fellow alums and students. So that was my first thank you. Thanks to all of you who completed the somewhat overly long MBA alumni salary survey in the fall. More than 1,500 of you participated. There was a raffle prize with dinner with me at Chez Panisse, which one lucky participant who filled it out got to go to. Actually, 6 of them did. We will be able to share the results from that survey soon. And thanks to all of you who are sending in job postings for our May graduates and for our alumni. We also appreciate all that have joined the recently launched Haassies Helping Haassies initiative with job leads, network connections, and peer support for those seeking employment. Your unconditional support, your focus, and your efforts to hire Haas are direct signals of the strength of our network. Now I'd like to share briefly, before we get to our keynote speaker, how Haas is the heart of what's next. Since we are a top business school, you won't be surprised that we are guided by our strategic plan in achieving being the heart of what's next. Formulation of the plan was led by full-time MBA Haas alum and our COO, Courtney Chandler. The plan has 4 strategic pillars, and I want to touch on each of them briefly. The first pillar of the plan is building on our reputational strength as a top business school. One important aspect of achieving reputational strength and overall top 5 status is faculty growth. In the last 5 years since I became dean, we have increased our ladder faculty by 30%. Now, this is actually quite an achievement. It's an achievement because overall the UC Berkeley campus in the last 40 years has not increased its ladder faculty at all, not even 1%, okay? Although the number of students, and that's something to think about for your enterprising children, the number of students on the Berkeley campus has gone up by, in that same time frame, 40%. So Our accomplishment here at Haas is quite important. It helps improve the student experience, our research output, and our ability to inform the public on what's important. I hope you've seen our faculty featured in local, national, and international news. Actually, one of our faculty members is now the advisor to the head of the German government, so she appears on the front page of European newspapers, Ulrike Malmagier, quite frequently. Now, I can't talk about reputation without talking about rankings. Reputational strength is unfortunately often linked with how we rank. And I'm happy to report that each of our programs that are ranked, which is 5 out of our 6 programs, appears in the top 5 in one of the popular rankings. So in particular, whoever here is from the evening and weekend MBA program, please stand up, stand up, stand up, stand up, stand up, stand up. Great. So our evening and weekend program this week was ranked by U.S. News as #1 in the United States. As you can imagine, I'm really, really happy about that. We finally beat out the University of Chicago, which was #1 for the last 5 years. So our full-time program this year was ranked for the first time in the top 4 by the Financial Times. Okay? Don't laugh. That's important. The Financial Times is the leading ranking newspaper for international readers, right? So if you're international, that's what you really care about. Our executive MBA was ranked #1 in the Economist Executive MBA rankings. And then our MFE program, which is the Master's in Financial Engineering. A number of MBA students, current students and past students, are increasingly doing both. Well, some are doing both. They're doing both the MFE and the MBA. That's frequently ranked either #1 or #2 in standard rankings for MFE programs, and we're able to surpass schools like, for example, Princeton, NYU, Columbia. So our MFE program is also doing really well. Our undergraduate program, how many of you are double bears? Stand up. Ooh, we have we have quite a few. Whoa. Woohoo! Great. Our double bears are doing well too. Our undergraduate program has consistently been ranked by U.S. News #2 in the country, only surpassed by Wharton. But I am determined to beat my previous employer, the Wharton School of Business. So, in order to cement that particular reputational strength, we will begin accepting this fall applications for our 4-year Speaker Undergraduate Business Program. Before, we were a 2-year undergraduate program, which made it hard for us. I mean, we almost got to the top. We were #2, but it's hard to be #1 with only a 2-year undergraduate program. So we'll start this fall. We are really excited about the possibilities with our expanded undergraduate program and the full Haas immersion that it will create. One of the priorities of the newly named Speaker Undergraduate Program, named after Ned and Carol Speaker, who were also undergraduates here at Haas, is to build on our reputation as a true engine of social mobility. Berkeley is known for this. A study by Harvard and Berkeley professors showed that Berkeley is #1 among the very top universities in moving students from the lowest 20% of the income distribution into the top 1%. So across all our programs, we teach our students to create economic opportunity, not just for themselves, but for others as well. And that's my favorite defining leadership principle, beyond yourself. That is what sets Berkeley Haas and Berkeley Haas students and Berkeley Haas alums significantly apart from all the other business schools, which I've had the pleasure of teaching in. The second pillar of our strategic plan is elevating the student experience and outcomes. This is really important. We are the top public school, but I cannot say yet that we provide the top private school student experience. In the fall, we put together a task force to ensure that our student experience is the best that it can be. We are designing more holistic student academic and career advising programs. We're now instituting more pre-program preparation for those of you who come in with non-traditional backgrounds. You may not quite have the math background or the stats background or the economics background that your co-students have. And we're also providing more program support. We're starting with the full-time program. And after we revamp that program, we'll be looking at our evening weekend program next. Other aspects of that pillar are enhanced network opportunities. I believe we can do a better job with networking. And another important pillar of that strategic plan is enhancing lifelong learning for alumni like yourself. So we now have another new program that we've introduced is our new Flex program, which is part of our evening weekend program. It launched in the fall. Through that Flex program, a lot of courses are now accessible virtually, right? So we put together hundreds of hours in creating some of these really great courses. We're going to be utilizing those opportunities of creating more virtual material to help with lifelong learning. Remember, another important defining leadership principle is student always. The third pillar of the plan is elevating principled business education. I believe that Haas is leading the way in transforming business to tackle the world's biggest challenges. Right now, those challenges that we're focusing on, you already heard, are innovation, sustainability, and inclusion. In innovation and entrepreneurship, which I'm putting together in one bucket. We've just broken ground, and you can see it in our new entrepreneurship hub, which is right across from the stadium. It's right next to Haas, a few doors down on Piedmont Avenue. You can see all the barriers around the old Julia Morgan House. You can see a vision of what that will look like once it's redone. The hub will offer programming and networking for entrepreneurial minds from across the campus. We will encourage you to come back and engage in these activities so there'll be even more opportunities to be involved in the hottest new ideas and startups in the future. The hub comes on top of us having hired a whole group of outstanding entrepreneurship faculty during my tenure to create a new faculty group in entrepreneurship and innovation, headed up by Toby Stewart. In the meantime, our Haas entrepreneurs continue to thrive. We placed fourth behind Harvard in the total dollar amount raised by alumni-founded startups, according to Poets and Quants. And all three of our MBA programs were represented in the recent finals this week of the UC Launch Accelerator. On sustainability, last month we hosted our first climate finance conference led by former Dean Laura Tyson with a welcome by former Vice President Al Gore. Haas is on the leading edge of this field, thanks to our faculty, our enterprising alumni, and we have some very exciting programs such as our Sustainable and Impact Finance Initiative, known as SAFE, where students learn to manage portfolios in both the public and the private market space in the areas of sustainability. We also just launched a new alumni affinity group focused on sustainability. Anyone in that affinity group, please stand up. Anyone here? Oh, no, too bad. Okay, it's too new. If that is of interest, please join it. On DEIBJ, we have built an outstanding DEIBJ team to lead our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts at Haas. We've made tremendous strides in diversifying our faculty, our students, and our staff over the past few years. I know that I have the most diverse and the most effective senior leadership team of any of the colleges at UC Berkeley. I believe my senior leadership team 50% of that team is either Latinx or African American, and they are just killing it compared to all the other leadership teams at Berkeley. But who's competing, right? Okay. But to ensure that we deliver on our inclusion promise, we're also working really hard right now in making sure that everybody feels like they belong here. Last pillar of the strategic plan is financial strength. One huge component, in fact, a huge component of our financial strength is you, our alumni. Before we launch into today's program, I want to give a shout out to our great alumni who are showing up and giving back. We know that we can count on all of you to hire Haas, to mentor a student, to recruit for Haas, to ask your peers to donate during Big Give. This year, our alumni contributed more than $1.4 million to Haas in just 24 hours. And to date, this year, we have raised nearly $2.3 million just from 515 of our reunion alumni. So that's really amazing. Thank you all. I invite you all to find an area at Haas that inspires you and invest philanthropically in the school so that we can reach our full potential. Our school-wide Haas Annual Fund is our most critical fund in many ways. It functions both as our most flexible R&D dollars for emerging initiatives and opportunities, as well as helps us close unforeseeable gap. Beyond our Haas Fund, I want to remind you, in case you didn't know, that our top peers, who I'm confident we will beat eventually, have endowments that are from 2 to 10x larger than ours. So while we're incredibly proud of what we do with far fewer resources, imagine what is possible if more of our alumni could step up to help us reach greater heights. There are many ways to make endowment gifts at Haas that will deliver a significant impact. Overall, the contributions of our alumni, from the work you do in the world, to your investment in Haas's future, to your hiring of our graduates, are critical to keeping our school at the forefront of business schools worldwide. So if you have not yet made a gift this year, we welcome your participation and thank all of you for being here today and for your support. Now, I'd like to introduce somebody very special. Our very own Yamini Rangan, the CEO of HubSpot. Yamini is a tech industry veteran who has risen through the ranks in product marketing, sales, and strategy at Dropbox, Workday, and SAP. She became the CEO of HubSpot in 2021. She earned her Haas MBA in 2003. She was recognized as one of the most influential women in business by the San Francisco Business Times in 2019. Yamini has been actively involved in our Haas community, and we are really so deeply honored that she can share her reflections and perspectives as a leader in tech at her 20th MBA reunion. Please join me in welcoming Yamini to the podium. Thank you so much.
It is so fantastic to be here, right? So good to be here. I was walking down the stairs this morning coming into Berkeley, and I had the same level of energy, enthusiasm, excitement as I did 20 years ago as I was taking classes with many of you here on campus. Class of 2003, shout out. It is so fun to be back here. Now, reunions are a time for reflection. So whether you're here in your 5th, 10th, 15th, or 45th, anybody here from 45th? Huge. It is such a great time to reflect, and I've certainly been reflecting. After I graduated from Haas, I wanted a career transition. I wanted to go into consulting, I wanted to go into marketing, I wanted to go into finance, almost anything away from engineering, really. But 2003 was tough, and the environment was quite difficult, not dissimilar to the macro environment that we find ourselves in. So I landed a job in sales within a high-tech company. Now, that made my parents, who were already disappointed in me, that I was not a doctor like my sister, just give up on me. Anybody here try and sell to your Indian parents and relatives that you're doing a sales job? I couldn't even pass that test of selling that to my parents. It was tough. So I muddled through the first few years of transitioning from engineer to being in sales, and I'd just gotten promoted into my first sales manager role. I was excited about it. After a year or so, I got my performance review. It was a 360 performance review, and it was bad. It was the kind, where I had like 5 pages of all the kinds of things that I need to do better, the things that I was not really motivating my team. I'm sure some of you may have gotten performance reviews like that, but mine was particularly bad. And I looked at that, and I had this moment of panic of, did I really choose a completely wrong profession? And for whatever reason, the company that I was working with at that time, they decided that they were going to match me with an executive coach. And they put me in touch with an executive coach and said, well, go work with her and figure out what's broken about your approach. So I walk into this room to try and meet my coach for the first time. My posture's like this. I was partly defensive, and partly had given up on my leadership career before it had actually even begun. And my coach, who I've now gotten to know her over many, many years, took one look at me with my negative body language and defensiveness, and she smiled, and she asked this question: chocolate or vanilla? I thought that was the strangest question to ask. Chocolate or vanilla? So I took a brief minute and I said, chocolate. How does it really matter? And what she said was simple and profound and has been the foundation for my unconventional journey to becoming a CEO. And she said, leadership is all about intentional choices that you make in your life. If I just gave you vanilla, would you choose vanilla? And will you choose to be a great leader? Will you choose to be a great leader? That's the question she asked me that day. I thought about it that day. I thought about it the next few weeks, and I've thought about it over the years. Now, choices happen to all of us. We all make choices. In fact, I'd made multiple choices in my life before that. I'd chosen to be an engineer in India, and I went to a program which had less than 8% women in the whole class. And every day, my male classmates would remind me gently that I was not really going to use my technical degree. Choices were not new to me. I actually took a one-way ticket from India to come here when I was 21. I had a few $100s in my pocket, lots of hopes and dreams. But intentional choices that you can stand by to become a leader, that felt very different. So what I want to do is actually share 4 choices I have made in my journey and the leadership lessons that I take from all of those choices. The first choice is go fast or go far. It turns out that my bad performance review, it's a common leadership challenge. It happens. Nobody tells you that. But when you go from being an individual contributor to being a manager, it's a tricky transition. And it was certainly tricky for me. I was actually pretty decent as a salesperson. I exceeded my quotas. I worked really hard. I had answers. And so I was reasonable in my job. But when I transitioned into being a sales manager, well, I wanted every single person to follow my playbook. That works, right? Just give your playbook and ask everyone to do exactly that. Well, obviously, it doesn't work at all. And turns out, 40% of newly promoted managers and executives actually fail within the first 18 months. 50% of them don't do anything to support the culture and the team environment. And so when my coach looked at me, it was pretty obvious to her that I needed to slow down. But more importantly, I needed to make an intentional choice if I wanted to go far or if I wanted to go fast. So I decided I was not going to give up that easily, and I was going to go at it. So I said, okay, I'm going to go far. But that meant I needed to reinvent my entire playbook. That meant I needed to have better questions. I really needed to get to know how to ask questions instead of giving answers to my team members. How good is it if you just go and give the answers? It meant that I needed to slow down and enroll people in my vision, not just ask them to follow me. I needed to earn the trust of everybody around me. And it really meant that I had to change my entire mindset. I stopped being the fastest runner on the team and started becoming much more like a cross-country coach within the team. And that's when I started seeing results. And to this day, I think this is probably my most important leadership lessons, which is whenever I change a job, I go to a different company, I tell myself to slow down in order to go far. The second choice is, do I fit in or do I stand out? Now, when I started in the tech industry 20 years ago, there weren't that many women in the room, especially in sales, much less like women of color. So I went into the room, looked around, not a lot of people like me in the room. I don't know if the room treated me differently. I certainly treated the room very differently. And I really wanted to fit in, to be like others within the room. That's what happens. If you're a woman of color, a first-generation immigrant, you're a minority, you really want to fit in. And the transition from being an engineer to being a sales manager, that's a particularly hard one. As an engineer, I was good at problem solving, being analytical, being logical, being first principles thinker, but that didn't seem to help as a sales manager. And I looked at my colleagues around the room. They had this ease of establishing relationship with customers, this nice banter, the ability to talk about sports, the ability to play golf. And I was super logical. I said, well, I'm going to learn golf. Not logical at all. But I was like, yeah, that seems like a good idea. I'm going to learn golf. Except that I sucked at it. It's terrible. It's just absolutely terrible. I know some of you have played with me. I'm so bad. So terrible at it. And I didn't have the patience to actually pick up that new sport. And by then I had 2 kids at home under 3 and try to go and play a 9-hole round when you have 2 kids under 3 at home. Forget it. So I said, well, this is not going to work for me. I don't think I can become successful as a sales manager playing golf. So let me go back to what I know. And what I did know is being data-oriented, being very customer-focused. I spent a lot of time being analytical and poring over 10 Ks, 10 Qs of my customers, understanding their priorities, getting good at asking them deep questions about their business, being able to share insights about their business. And that worked. I started seeing results. I started seeing success in my sales management job by doing what I had strengths in. And that's when my confidence changed. Nothing happened in the room. It was just that my attitude towards the room changed completely. And so, for any of you out there, don't fit in. Be authentic. Just embrace your authenticity. And in fact, there's tons of research that have proven that being authentic boosts performance, both as an individual contributor, but also as a leader. Authentic leaders say exactly what's on their mind. They're able to solicit feedback from everybody around, even if that feedback is counter to their own beliefs. They act on their stated beliefs. And they're able to take all that feedback. So be authentic. Now, my third choice was, do I follow a visible path or do I take an invisible path? Now, this is not very intuitive, so let me explain. The visible path is something that we all know. When we get out from school, we take up a role. It could be in product, it could be in nonprofit, it could be in finance, it could be in sales. And when we start there, we typically look up and we see people having a great career path. It could be going from where you are to a manager, maybe a vice president. And then if you continue to become successful, more senior roles right within your role. Now, in that visible path, you are functional experts. You're fantastic at your function. You become an expert within your function. You begin optimizing for your team's performance. You begin optimizing for the relevance of your teams. Sometimes you're optimizing for the scope of problems that you solve and maybe even the size of the team that you're focused on. If you're really, really good at your functional job, you put your team over yourself. But then there is an invisible path. And that opens up when you go from being a functional expert to actually being a company leader. That happens when you stop just thinking about your function and you become much better at connecting your dots across multiple functions. And that happens when you stop putting yourself and your team in front. You start putting your customer and your company in front. And so, customer over company, over team, over self becomes your North Star. I didn't know this, but I started at a company after many years in a sales strategy role, so Dropbox. Some of you may have heard, some of you may be using us. We're a Bay Area company. And I started in a strategy function. But most importantly, I started really focusing on our customers and the company. So even though I was a functional leader, I spent a lot of time connecting the dots across the teams. I talked product, I talked marketing, I talked to sales, and I explained the context of the decisions that the company was making. So I became really a cross-functional leader. And something opened up that I didn't know existed. One of the leaders who exited the business had named me as a successor. I didn't know that. And there was just a lot of trust that I could take on a bigger role across the company. At that time, I'd not run marketing. I didn't know much about service or support. I'd done a little bit in sales. But I'd earned the trust and credibility as a cross-functional leader. And I did that really by focusing on the most important thing, which is customer and company. Some point in your leadership journey, think about what you're optimizing for. Think about what matters the most, whether it's yourself or the company. And I think that invisible paths open up when you do that. The last choice I want to talk to you about is, do I work forward from the past or do I work backwards from the future? And I'm kind of living this right now. I want to tell you a story of how I became the CEO of HubSpot. For people who don't know HubSpot, we provide marketing, sales, and service solutions to mid-market companies. We've been around for 17 years, 170,000 customers worldwide, about 7,000 employees. I joined HubSpot leading all of their go-to-market functions in January 2020. Yeah, perfect time. 2 months later, they were like, yep, try and save this company because we don't know where it is going. It was a pretty difficult time. I totally empathize with you, joining Haas in 2019. So we muddled our way through the first year of the pandemic. And a year later, I'd been there barely about a year, our CEO calls me up. Now, Brian Halligan, many of you may have heard of him, but a fantastic person. He had co-founded this company. He had run this company for 15 years. He called me on a Sunday from his hospital bed. He had met with a snowmobile accident and had broken a lot of bones and needed a ton of time to recover. So he called and said, hey, run the company. And that was it. No handbook, no playbook, just a terse instruction, don't mess it up. Like, thank you. That feels good. So we did, and this is when having leadership principles and a fantastic team helps. We focused on the company, we focused on our customers, we knew that we had a clear strategy, and we actually helped the company not just survive, but thrive through the pandemic. It was the best year. 2021 was the best growth year at HubSpot through a transition within the global economy, as well as everything that was happening from a hybrid workplace perspective. So 6 months, thank you. 6 months later, I get another call, again from Brian. Hey, how are you? I'm good. Well, I want you to take up the CEO job permanently. Again, terse instruction, don't mess it up. Now, any of you who've met Brian knows he's a visionary. He's just exceptional, and he's probably one of the best CEOs around. And so when you get a call like that, your life flashes in front of you. What is going on? I can't really fathom this. But then something else happens. You begin to get a ton of doubts. Well, I haven't done this job before. I got to focus on the board. I got to focus on the investors. I'm not really sure how I'm going to do this. Anybody imposter syndrome? Well, I have it in plenty. All of the doubts that you really can think about, it just comes flashing that particular minute. So this time, I did what I have now can count on myself to do, which is make a choice. And I made a choice to work backwards from the future and not work forwards from the past. I grounded myself in the future for the kind of company that we have the potential to become, for the kind of CEO that I potentially can become. I was very clear that HubSpot can be a multi-generational company in the future. I'm very clear that I want to contribute for diversity and inclusivity in the tech industry. I'm very clear that I want to be a great mom for my 2 teen boys. I want to be a great partner for my husband, Cash, who's been a huge supporter throughout this journey. And I want to be a great friend for many of you here in the room who've become my tribe and have supported me throughout the last 20 years. I'm very clear on the choices, and they're all choices in the future. And so my actions are clearly aligned to the kind of future that I want to create. So think about where you are. Think about when you come back for the next reunion, what you want to be. These 4 choices have worked for me. I have conviction in them, and I stand by these 4. What is it for you? What are the choices that you want to make that will serve you well through highs and lows, right and wrong? What will make you feel really fulfilled in your life every time you come back to this campus and you look back at your personal life and your professional life? If life gave you chocolate or vanilla, or if life gave you just vanilla, what would you choose? Thank you so much.
All right, we are going to open it up for some Q&A. Can we get hands raised where the mics are so we know where folks can go? Perfect. All right, bring your questions. Let's see those hands. Yamini, you want to come back? I will be terrible at answering them, so.
All right.
That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Class of 91, old dude. Your words about diversity and inclusion are really inspiring. And in my experience in business, when you have a diverse team, you're going to make better decisions. It's really so clear. Well, 2 nights ago in New York, Peter Thiel of Stanford used the phrase to a gathering of cryptocurrency leaders and the head of Hillsdale College, that wonderful conservative think tank, and he said, diversity is a divertisement. So you face this a negative reaction. You face opposition to the concept of diversity, the concept of inclusion. How do you take that on as a public leader?
Wow, yes. I think this is a time where you have to get past the debate of whether you need diversity or not. I just do not want to go back to the time where we prove that diversity is important. I think we have to get to the point where we can walk the walk on diversity, not just talk about diversity. I can tell you in my career, especially 20 years ago when I graduated and was in high tech, it really needed a lot more role models. And we really needed, and it still continues to be the case in terms of high tech as well as other industries. And so I focus on walking the walk. Our board is 70% diverse, 50% women, and it starts there. Our executive team is 60% women and diverse leaders, and it starts there. And then you focus on the actions that you can take every single month and year in terms of moving it forward, and you just continue to walk the walk.
Hi, a question over here. Your presentation was absolutely spectacular. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I was intrigued by the slide in which you have customer over company, over team, over self. And to be perfectly candid, that strikes me as something that is great for a presentation in a business school. But could you give an example of an issue in which you would put customer over company,
yes,
and that would work in the long run?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, COVID was the time that tested the customer over company specifically. So as I mentioned, I joined my employer HubSpot in January 2020, and March 2020, COVID hit, and pretty much everything shut down. And we started looking at our numbers regarding our customers in March and April of 2020. Churn was exceptionally high. We served small and medium businesses. Businesses were going out of business. They were not surviving. And our churn had dropped by about 20%. Churn basically is the number of customers who leave a business in a given month or a given quarter. And we were losing money. We were losing money pretty significantly at a pace that we had never seen before. And one of the things we needed to do is figure out what our plan was going to be in terms of customers. So we stepped back and we said, what is going to help customers at this point? Well, they don't have cash. They don't have predictability and visibility of what their next 3 months and 6 months is going to look like. So we put customer over company, and we did a few things. We slashed the price of our product by, I think, 75%. And we moved a number of paid tools down into free so that our customers would be able to connect with their customers for free. And we gave extra commissions for all of our partners so they could pay their employees. And we did this, and we created a customer relief fund in the tune of $50 million. When I presented that to the board was like, what's your plan for recovering all of this? I said, don't know. Yeah, I'm sure that got me, a lot of credibility in the first 3 months. But we basically said we were going to save our customers, and that was a set of things that we did, and turns out was the right call, because when COVID turned around and when customers stabilized their cash flow and they started moving into digital, we had gained goodwill from them, and it paid out. And like I said before, 2021 was our single best year as a public company, and that was because of what we did for our customers in 2020.
I have two up here.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Dhaval Shah. I'm an alumni too, and I also walked at the Greek Theatre in 2003 for my degree. One fun question and then one more serious one. The fun question is, which were some of your favorite classes? And the serious one was maybe giving you a chance to talk more about HubSpot. You said about the multi-generational possibilities, right? So I'm sure there's some things that distinguish whether some companies become that or not. So what makes you feel that, and what do you see in HubSpot that makes you, where will that be for HubSpot?
Yeah, thank you for both of those questions. The first one is actually really easy. I took macro with Andy Rose, Professor Andy Rose. And it was phenomenal. I think we were all, back in 2002, 2003, we had some amazing macro professors. It was Professor Yellen, who is amazing. She makes us proud every single day. And it was Andy Rose, and I took Andy Rose 8 a.m. in the morning. I would not recommend that. And he cold called me every single time. I would not recommend sitting in the first row, but it was super enjoyable, and I think I learned a lot from that class. In terms, of HubSpot, we really think about how do we build a company that future generations will be proud of, and that requires us to make long-term decisions, not short-term decisions. And I think we're going through that moment right now. There are a couple of things that are happening in the macro perspective. Obviously, we went through a huge tailwind in the tech industry, followed by a fairly significant deceleration. So we have to make decisions that are long-term oriented, not short-term oriented. And I think the other big thing that's happening in the industry is generative AI. And you think about, cloud transition was a fairly big transition in tech, and generative AI is as big and disruptive. And so, again, this is a time that reminds us that as we make decisions, it needs to be for the next 20 years, not just the next 2 years. And so we're, in the midst of navigating some really fun and unique times within the tech industry. So that's how we think about it.
Hi, Yamini.
Elizabeth.
Your classmate, Elizabeth. What I was thinking about when you were speaking is picturing you feeling alone in a room. And I just wanted to say, you are in our room. You are always part of our community. And I'm so freaking proud that you're a CEO. You totally deserve this. You can run anything. And so it's wonderful to hear you speak. My question for you is more in the personal story kind of career advice category. I feel like when I've been in positions of rapid promotions, sometimes it's felt very lonely because suddenly you're a leader of other people, so maybe the things that would be critical that you'd want to share, you feel like you can't say because you're supposed to be the optimist, the cheerleader. And I'm just wondering if you have any examples from your own career path at different moments, whether it's being CEO or earlier in life, where you had that sense of loneliness and how you might have dealt with it. And maybe you didn't have it, but I'm just curious about that.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's so fun to be back on campus with you, my friend. It is, leadership, again, is a choice. And part of the times you feel lonely, part of the times you have people around you. But again, I think of it as a choice that I make. There were particularly moments, I would say, in my journey, especially when, we had kids and very early on. And my wonderful husband is here. He knows the struggles that we had. He was working, I was working. We were, traveling in different cities. We had 2 kids under, 3, 4. And it just feels like you're almost hanging in a cliff and you're almost about to give up on the cliff and you'll fall down with no safety net. It definitely feels like that. I would say that days are long, but years are short. And you have to have the perspective that there are parts of your journey that's going to feel incredibly difficult and incredibly lonely. But then you really have to have the perspective of what you want to accomplish longer term in your life, which is why one of the best exercises that I've done over the years, and I've done it a couple of times, is really to think about 2030 or 2050. What would I say to, if I were a 70-year-old Yamini, what would I tell a 40-year-old Yamini? And I'd say, stop being perfect, and this is something that I had to personally overcome. There's just this whole need to be perfect and to do things much better. And that also was because there were not that many people like me in the room. That's number one. Stop feeling mom's guilt. I've had the guilt of leaving my kid and going on to a business trip, or the guilt of not being there in every one of their plays. I think they're great. They're amazing teens, and I get to spend quality time and really enjoy the journey. I think those would be the things, but you have to know that there are parts of the journey that are going to be just incredibly difficult, and then you just look past it.
Hey,
Last question.
Thank you, Shannon.
Yamini, this is Steve Terasaki, and I'm Evening Weekend from 1989, so it's coming up to 35 years next year.
Awesome.
I'm an executive leadership coach, and I wanted to thank you, first of all, for this wonderful talk that you've given. One of the things that I want to ask you is, when your statement about working backwards, right? And as someone who is in tech, today, in the last couple of days, your former company reduced their workforce by 16%. And part of the rationalization for that reduction was they wanted to retool their workforce because AI is becoming such an important force in tech. So my question to you is, you think about working backwards, and what is that vision for HubSpot in incorporating AI into what it means for HubSpot? And how does that change your trajectory and your strategic planning?
Yeah, that's a great question. And class of 89, that's amazing. Welcome back to campus. It is, and so if people didn't catch the reference, so Dropbox, the former employer that he was talking about, they did do a 16% layoff, and it was partly for retooling. And if you're in high tech, everything is about generative AI, and it's really using large language models to be able to generate code, generate command, generate insights, and generate content. And that's a big disruption that's happening over in the industry. My perspective is that AI is not going to replace humans, but humans that use AI will replace humans that don't use AI. So I think it's with every technology shift, that's what we see, is that you need to get to the next generation. You need to be able to, develop your skill sets and for the next generation. And so I deeply believe that part of our strategic planning is how do we enable any knowledge worker, and certainly in our case, front office knowledge workers, to be able to, leverage AI and the expertise of AI without having to become large language model experts themselves or having to do that. And so I think we're going to go through a period where next year looks clear, but next 5 years and next 10 years is not very clear within the technology industry. And the best thing that you can do is to create a human feedback loop of how generative AI and AI can really augment human intelligence. I don't think that artificial intelligence is going to supersede it. It's really going to be a path for guided intelligence of how we leverage this technology. So I'm very optimistic about how we do it and hope we do it the right way for our customers. Thank you so much. Thanks for the question.